Today, Japan is known for bullet trains, advanced robotics, global car companies, and a culture that reaches millions through anime, games, food, and design. Yet this modern nation emerged from a very different world. For centuries, Japan was divided among rival warrior clans, ruled in practice by shoguns, and protected by an island geography that encouraged both independence and isolation. It restricted most foreign contact for more than 200 years, only to industrialize with astonishing speed, build an empire across Asia, and suffer catastrophic defeat in 1945. From the ruins of war, Japan rose again, not as a conquering military power, but as one of the richest and most influential societies on Earth. How did a fragmented feudal archipelago ruled by samurai transform into an industrial empire, survive total defeat, and reinvent itself as a global economic and cultural power? This is the entire history of Japan. Japan's story began with its geography. Stretching along the eastern edge of Asia, the Japanese archipelago was mountainous, volcanic, and separated from the continent by narrow seas. Early inhabitants survived through hunting, fishing, and gathering, gradually developing the Jomon culture, named for the cord-marked pottery they produced for thousands of years. During the first millennium BCE, new populations and ideas arrived from the Korean peninsula, helping introduce wet rice agriculture, bronze, iron, and more permanent farming communities. This transition, associated with the Yayoi period, transformed Japanese society. Rice could support larger populations, but it also created stored wealth that powerful families could control. Settlements expanded, social ranks became more visible, and local chiefs competed over fertile land and trade routes. Japan was still far from being a unified country, yet the foundations of organized political power were taking shape. From these competing communities, one ruling coalition would eventually rise above the others: Yamato. By the 4th and 5th centuries, a powerful coalition centered in the Yamato region of central Honshu had begun extending its authority over neighboring clans. Its rulers displayed their growing power through enormous keyhole-shaped burial mounds known as kofun, built for elite leaders and surrounded by clay figures called haniwa. Yamato control was not yet absolute, but alliances, military strength, and command of valuable agricultural land allowed its court to dominate large parts of central and western Japan. Contacts with China and the Korean peninsula accelerated this transformation. Immigrant artisans and scholars brought improved metalworking, Chinese writing, administrative knowledge, and new military techniques. Buddhism arrived through the Korean kingdom of Baekgyo during the 6th century, provoking conflict before gaining support among influential court families. Yamato rulers also strengthened their legitimacy by claiming descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu. By selectively adapting continental ideas, the court was laying the foundations of an organized Japanese state centered on imperial authority. During the 7th century, Yamato leaders adopted a series of reforms intended to strengthen the emperor and weaken the independence of powerful clans. Inspired by China's Tang dynasty, the court created official ranks, taxation systems, legal codes, and provincial administrations. In 710, it established a permanent capital at Nara, where Buddhist temples and government institutions reflected the ambitions of a centralized state. Yet the growing political influence of Buddhist monasteries helped persuade the court to relocate, first briefly and then permanently to Heian-kyo, modern Kyoto, in 794. There, aristocratic families, especially the Fujiwara, dominated imperial politics through marriage and court appointments. Heian culture produced refined poetry, painting, and literature, including the Tale of Genji. Outside the capital, however, tax-exempt private estates expanded and provincial officials gained greater independence. Landowners increasingly relied on armed retainers to defend their property. Over time, these provincial warriors developed into the military class, later known as the samurai. As the samurai grew stronger, rival warrior families began competing for control of the imperial court. By the late 12th century, this struggle centered on two great clans, the Taira and the Minamoto. The Taira first gained the advantage, placing relatives in powerful positions and dominating the government from Kyoto. Their rise, however, provoked widespread resistance. In 1180, the conflict erupted into the Genpei War, a brutal struggle fought across Japan. 5 years later, Minamoto forces destroyed the Taira fleet at the Battle of Dan-no-ura, ending Taira supremacy. Yoritomo, who had already established his headquarters at Kamakura during the conflict, emerged as Japan's dominant warrior leader, far from the aristocratic court in Kyoto. In 1192, he received the title of shogun, formalizing a new military government. The emperor remained an important source of legitimacy, but effective political authority now rested with the warrior class. Japan had entered the age of the samurai. The Kamakura shogunate faced its greatest external threat in the 13th century, when Kublai Khan's Mongol-led Yuan dynasty demanded Japan's submission. After the Japanese government refused, invasion forces sailed toward Japan in 1274 and again in 1281, with the second campaign combining fleets from Korea and southern China. Mongol forces brought unfamiliar tactics, coordinated formations, and explosive weapons, while Japanese samurai were more accustomed to smaller, individualized battles. The defenders resisted fiercely along the coast of Kyushu, and severe storms helped destroy or scatter both invasion fleets. Later generations remembered these storms as kamikaze, or divine winds, signs that Japan had received supernatural protection. Yet victory came at a dangerous cost. Because the wars produced no conquered territory, the shogunate had little new land with which to reward the warriors who had fought. Defensive preparations also placed heavy burdens on regional lords. Resentment spread, loyalty weakened, and the government that had saved Japan gradually lost control over the samurai who sustained it. By the early 14th century, dissatisfaction with Kamakura rule gave Emperor Go-Daigo an opportunity to challenge the military government. Samurai commanders turned against the shogunate, which collapsed in 1333. Go-Daigo briefly attempted to restore direct imperial rule, but his failure to reward powerful warriors drove Ashikaga Takauji into rebellion. Takauji established a new shogunate in Kyoto, beginning the Muromachi period, yet the Ashikaga government never controlled the provinces as firmly as Kamakura once had. Regional military governors accumulated land, wealth, and private armies, while disputes over succession weakened authority at the center. In 1467, rivalry among leading families erupted into the Onin War, reducing much of Kyoto to ruins during a decade of fighting. When the conflict ended, the shogunate possessed little effective power beyond the capital. Across Japan, ambitious daimyō overthrew their superiors, fortified their domains, and fought for survival. The country entered the Sengoku period, an age of near-constant civil war. Amid this disorder, warfare itself began to change. In 1543, Portuguese traders introduced matchlock firearms to Japan, and local craftsmen quickly learned to reproduce them. Although samurai did not abandon swords, bows, or cavalry, disciplined units of infantry armed with guns could now challenge older forms of warfare. No leader exploited these changes more effectively than Oda Nobunaga. Beginning with a relatively small domain in central Japan, he defeated stronger rivals through speed, organization, alliances, and the calculated use of firearms. In 1568, Nobunaga entered Kyoto and installed a new Ashikaga shogun, but when that relationship collapsed, he drove the shogun from the capital in 1573, effectively ending the Ashikaga government. He also crushed militant Buddhist institutions and defeated powerful daimyō who resisted his expansion. By 1582, Nobunaga controlled much of central Japan and seemed close to reunification. Then, betrayed by one of his generals, he died at Honnoji, leaving his unfinished conquest to Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi Hideyoshi moved quickly after Nobunaga's death, defeating the conspirators and taking control of his former lord's armies. Through diplomacy, sieges, and military campaigns, he brought the remaining daimyō under his authority, completing Japan's reunification by 1590. Hideyoshi then surveyed farmland, reorganized taxation, and ordered a sword hunt intended to separate armed samurai from farmers. Yet his ambitions soon extended beyond Japan. In 1592, he invaded Korea, hoping to conquer Ming China, but Korean resistance, Chinese intervention, and naval victories led by Admiral Yi Sun-sin prevented a lasting Japanese advance. A second invasion also failed, ending after Hideyoshi's death in 1598. Because his heir was still a child, competing lords struggled for control. Tokugawa Ieyasu emerged victorious at the decisive Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. 3 years later, he became shogun, establishing a military government that would rule Japan for more than 2.5 centuries. The Tokugawa shogunate transformed military victory into a durable political system. Although the emperor remained in Kyoto, real authority rested with the shogun in Edo, the city later renamed Tokyo. The Tokugawa divided the daimyo into categories based on loyalty, controlled strategic lands, and required official permission for marriages, castle repairs, and alliances. Before the new order was fully secure, Ieyasu eliminated its last major military threat. In 1615, Tokugawa forces destroyed Osaka Castle and defeated the remaining Toyotomi faction. Over the following decades, the shogunate tightened its control, eventually formalizing Sankin Kotai in 1635. This system required daimyo to alternate their residence between their domains and Edo, while their wives and heirs generally remained in the shogun's capital. After generations of civil war, Japan entered a prolonged era of internal peace. Samurai increasingly became administrators rather than battlefield warriors, while roads, castle towns, commerce, and literacy expanded. Yet preserving this stability required strict social control and increasingly careful regulation of foreign influence. To protect the Tokugawa order, the shogunate gradually restricted foreign contact and suppressed Christianity, which it viewed as a threat to political loyalty. Following the Shimabara Rebellion of 1637 to 1638, Portuguese traders were expelled, and Japanese subjects were generally forbidden from traveling abroad. Yet Japan was never completely sealed off. Dutch and Chinese merchants continued trading through Nagasaki, while controlled relations with Korea, the Ryukyu Kingdom, and the Ainu connected the country to wider regional networks. This regulated system allowed the shogunate to limit foreign influence while still obtaining goods, books, and scientific knowledge. Meanwhile, peace transformed domestic society. Edo grew into one of the world's largest cities, merchants became increasingly prosperous, and popular culture flourished through kabuki theater, woodblock prints, literature, and urban entertainment. The Tokugawa system appeared stable, but commercial growth and knowledge of the outside world were quietly creating pressures that its rigid political order would eventually struggle to contain. By the 19th century, economic strain, peasant unrest, and growing foreign pressure were exposing the weaknesses of Tokugawa rule. The decisive shock came in 1853, when Commodore Matthew Perry entered Edo Bay with American steam-powered warships and demanded that Japan open its ports. Unable to match Western military technology, the shogunate signed the Convention of Kanagawa in 1854. Further agreements, especially the Harris Treaty of 1858, opened additional ports and granted foreign powers legal and commercial privileges that many Japanese regarded as humiliating. Opposition rallied around the slogan, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, while powerful domains, such as Satsuma and Choshu, began challenging the shogunate. Ironically, after confronting Western firepower themselves, these domains modernized their armies and used imported weapons against Tokugawa forces. In 1867, the last shogun surrendered political authority, but the struggle continued in the Boshin War. The old military order was collapsing, and imperial restoration promised to replace it. Imperial victory in the Boshin War allowed the new government to consolidate power in the name of the young Emperor Meiji. Determined to prevent Japan from falling under Western domination, reformers, many from Satsuma and Choshu, dismantled the feudal order with remarkable speed. In 1871, the domains were abolished and replaced by prefectures controlled from Tokyo. Samurai stipends and privileges were eliminated, a national conscript army was created, and compulsory education began preparing citizens for a modern state. The government built railways, factories, shipyards, and telegraph lines while sending missions abroad to study Western institutions and technology. These changes provoked resistance, culminating in the defeat of the Satsuma Rebellion in 1877. A constitution followed in 1889, and an elected imperial diet opened the next year, although real power remained concentrated among oligarchs ruling in the emperor's name. Japan had modernized to escape imperial domination, but its new strength soon enabled it to pursue an empire of its own. Japan's transformation became unmistakable during the First Sino-Japanese War of 1894 to 1895. Its modern army and navy defeated Qing China, securing Taiwan and expanding Japanese influence over Korea. A decade later, competition in Manchuria and Korea brought Japan into conflict with the Russian Empire. Japanese forces captured Port Arthur, while Admiral Togo Heihachiro destroyed much of Russia's Baltic fleet at the Battle of Tsushima in 1905. Japan's victory shocked the world. An Asian nation had defeated a major European empire in modern warfare. In 1910, Japan formally annexed Korea, where colonial rule imposed political repression, economic exploitation, and pressure to assimilate. Taiwan and other territories also became testing grounds for imperial administration, infrastructure, and industrial development. But these projects primarily served Japanese power and were enforced without local consent. Japan had escaped the fate of colonization by mastering the institutions of empire. It was now using those same institutions to dominate its neighbors. Japan entered the 20th century as an expanding empire, but its political system remained fragile. During World War I, Japan joined the Allied powers, seized German possessions in China and the Pacific, and gained new markets while European rivals were distracted. The 1920s brought a period of parliamentary government known as Taisho democracy, and universal male suffrage was introduced in 1925. Yet democratic progress remained limited by powerful elites, political violence, and laws suppressing radical opposition. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 devastated Tokyo and Yokohama, while banking crises and the Great Depression later destroyed businesses and impoverished rural communities. As civilian governments appeared unable to restore stability, military officers and nationalist organizations gained public influence. Army leaders increasingly argued that Japan needed territory and resources to survive in a hostile world. In 1931, officers engineered a pretext for occupying Manchuria, beginning a military expansion that civilian politicians could no longer control. Japan's occupation of Manchuria deepened its isolation from the international community, but the military continued expanding. In 1937, a clash near Beijing escalated into full-scale war with China. Japanese forces captured major cities, yet China's government refused to surrender and moved inland. The conflict became increasingly brutal. After taking Nanjing, Japanese troops carried out mass killings, sexual violence, and widespread destruction in one of the war's most notorious atrocities. As resistance continued, Japan required more oil, steel, and other resources to sustain its campaigns. Seeking access to Southeast Asia, Japanese forces moved into French Indochina. The United States responded with escalating economic restrictions, culminating in an oil embargo in 1941. Japanese leaders now faced a choice between retreating from their conquests or seizing resource-rich territories by force. They chose expansion. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, bringing the United States directly into the war. Pearl Harbor gave Japan a temporary advantage. Within months, Japanese forces captured the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies, creating an empire that stretched across much of Asia and the Pacific. Yet the attack had failed to destroy America's aircraft carriers, and Japan lacked the industrial capacity to replace ships, aircraft, and trained pilots as rapidly as the United States. In June 1942, American forces sank 4 Japanese carriers at the Battle of Midway, shifting the strategic balance. The long struggle for Guadalcanal then halted Japan's advance, while an American island-hopping campaign bypassed strongholds and moved steadily toward the home islands. Submarines strangled Japanese shipping, and the battles of the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf shattered much of its remaining naval power. By 1945, Iwo Jima and Okinawa had fallen. American bombers were devastating Japanese cities, and the empire was collapsing, but Japan's leaders still refused to surrender. With invasion approaching and Japanese cities already devastated, the United States sought to force a rapid surrender. On August 6, 1945, an American bomber dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, destroying much of the city and killing tens of thousands of people immediately. 2 days later, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and launched a massive offensive against Japanese forces in Manchuria, destroying hopes that Moscow might mediate a negotiated peace. On August 9th, a second atomic bomb struck Nagasaki. Even then, Japan's leaders remained divided between surrender and continued resistance. Japan initially sought assurances that the emperor's position would be preserved, but the Allied response offered no explicit guarantee and placed imperial authority under the supreme commander. Hirohito nevertheless broke the deadlock within the government and authorized acceptance of the Potsdam terms. Japan announced its surrender on August 15th and formally signed the documents aboard the USS Missouri on September 2nd. The war had ended, but millions were dead. The empire was gone, and Japan itself lay occupied and ruined. Its next transformation would begin under foreign authority. Japan's surrender placed the country under an Allied occupation led primarily by the United States. Under General Douglas MacArthur, occupation authorities dismantled Japan's wartime military institutions, prosecuted major leaders, released political prisoners, and encouraged democratic reform. Women received the right to vote, land redistribution weakened powerful landlords, and labor unions gained new protections. The 1947 Constitution transferred sovereignty from the emperor to the people, reduced Emperor Hirohito to a symbolic role, and guaranteed civil liberties. Its famous Article 9 renounced war and declared that land, sea, and air forces would not be maintained. The later creation of the self-defense forces relied on an evolving interpretation of Japan's right to self-defense. Economic reforms also attempted to reduce the influence of the great industrial conglomerates that had supported the empire. When the occupation of Japan's main islands ended in 1952, the country regained its sovereignty with a radically altered political system. Although Okinawa remained under American administration until 1972. The defeated empire had become a constitutional democracy, now closely aligned with the United States, and positioned for an extraordinary economic recovery. Japan soon achieved one of history's fastest economic recoveries. American procurement during the Korean War stimulated industry, while education, investment, export-oriented policies, and increasingly efficient manufacturing drove decades of growth. Japanese automobiles, Electronics, cameras, and production methods reshaped global markets. By the 1980s, soaring stock and property prices made Japan appear capable of overtaking the United States economically. The bubble burst in the early 1990s, beginning prolonged stagnation. Since then, Japan has faced an aging population, low birth rates, heavy public debt, and sharper regional competition. Yet its influence extends far beyond economic growth. Anime, manga, video games, cuisine, design, cars, and technology have become part of global life. Modern Tokyo therefore contains every layer of Japan's transformation. Yamato State Building, Samurai Rule, Tokugawa Order, Meiji Industry, Imperial Catastrophe, and post-war renewal. Japan's greatest strength was not isolation or conquest, but its repeated ability to absorb outside influences, transform them, and rebuild when the old order could no longer survive.